My pleasure to have Robert Marsala at the table. Thanks very much for coming in. I saw this book in a different light. You're a photographer and you do some really interesting things with your camera, shooting with infrared. You took your camera out and you shot places that are abandoned. Why did you do that? Or why do you do that?
For me, there's really an inherent beauty in how the buildings interact with nature when man doesn't lay a hand on it for many years. The buildings in themselves are really architectural gems. And
industrial buildings, hospitals that have been abandoned.
Correct, and former mental institutions. They're taken over by nature in very different ways, and but yet the buildings are very, very resilient. And I just find that the hand of nature affecting itself on the best efforts of mankind to kind of take over nature is an interesting and kind of beautiful battle going on.
When did you know that was going to be your niche, to do that?
It actually just happenstance. I was out on a Sunday drive with my wife, and we saw a building up on a hill. We wondered what the heck it was, because it was so out of context. It was down around Danville, New York, and we drove up to it and found it was an abandoned health spa, and it was wide open.
Cameras in the car, I'm going for it?
Yes, I don't go anywhere without my camera. Had it with me. It was completely the wrong film, the wrong everything, but I made do and kind of got the bug there. Just like I say, it was just purely accidental.
How did you become a photographer? You were telling me a little bit about being in the 6th grade and getting a camera.
Right. My dad as a youth had played around with developing and photography, and in the mid-'60s he took it back up again, and I professed an interest in learning more about the darkroom activity, so I got a family camera hand-me-down, and I went out and was shooting and developing my own pictures in a home darkroom, and I just happened to they had a 6th grade Olympics going on. It was the first at my little school, and I said, you want me to take pictures? And they said, sure, bring your camera, and they ended up being printed in the local
So you were published
newspaper.
in the 6th grade?
Correct.
Okay, so then high school comes and college, you continue down this photography path?
Correct, yes. I did not look at it as a profession per se. It was always for my own enjoyment, and just, again, back then not a lot of people had cameras or had sophisticated cameras that could take a multitude of different types of shots. So I just was kind of the go-to person in a very small upstate New York town.
You piqued my interest with this because, as I said, abandoned sites, and we are all just people walking through these different places. You put this in a book. This is your first book, but I want to take a look at some of the pictures inside this book, and we'll talk about what it is that you saw through the lens to take the picture.
Sure.
So let's look at the first one and tell me exactly what this is, because some of these, to me, I got to tell you, Robert, are creepy. Look at this. Yep. What is that? Or we're just going through these.
Going through the pictures.
Yeah.
These are Fairfield Hills, former state hospital that has since been purchased by the town of Newtown for development into, I think, their town hall, and they've got a nice lot of grounds there. That
and then these are some
out.
of the ones inside, and there's graffiti all over the place.
Most places that I encounter have been entered long before I have happened upon them, and the tagging and graffiti art is pretty universal, and it runs the gamut of very high quality to just silliness.
Some of these are infrared now.
Yep.
What is this technique that we see here?
I have a dedicated infrared camera. All the sensors on digital cameras will accept more than just visible light. The camera manufacturers put filters over the sensors to exclude unwanted. And for most cameras, they just want what's in the visible spectrum. There's a service that pulls out that filter and puts on a one that will pass infrared, which is above the visible spectrum, which is about 740 nanometers to about 1400 nanometers, which is a billionth of an inch wavelength, and it only allows radiated infrared to image on the sensor.
So we're looking at some of these pictures right now, and the lack of color I find very intriguing. As I said, they look creepy, but they're really kind of neat. Is there a call for you to frame these, and do you sell these? Do people find these really interesting?
People really take to the infrared, and that was a difficult portion of how to assemble the book, because I wanted to integrate the infrared with the interior shots. That's part of the reason I did the book and kept the book very affordable for folks, because this is really to showcase some of the work that I have and get myself into galleries so I can have prints
You
sold.
also have a blog, Robert, and I'm just going to read something that you wrote. Shooting in abandoned buildings is dangerous and is not for the faint-hearted. I always let someone know where I will be and what time to expect me back to check in. I wear heavy boots and clothes even in the heat of summer. In addition, I use a half-mask P100 respirator, full-finger climbing gloves, and a military surplus Kevlar vest. I always operate with the mindset, if in doubt, don't. Describe that for me. I'm picturing you as the warrior going into some of these buildings.
Actually, that's a good analogy, is the entire process of finding the places, seeing where to put my car so I'm not bothered, or rightfully so, by neighbors that might wonder what I'm up to. I get suited up and I go in and
Cover me, I'm going in.
Exactly, and I've been told I'm quite the imposing figure all suited up, because I don't take chances with the buildings, because the buildings, they're abandoned, and they're abandoned for a reason, and a lot of the times that's lead, asbestos, and other, if it's industrial chemicals that are dangerous.
You're moving photography ahead in this direction, and as I said, when I knew you were coming in, I looked on a lot of blogs, and I see people shooting abandoned buildings, and to me there's real beauty in this, but beyond it is, I want to fix up all these buildings, and of course we can't. It's too expensive to do that. But as a person shooting this, what are you thinking when you're in these abandoned spaces?
I tell you that there's really a sense of, I know this is kind of counterintuitive, a sense of calm comes over me. I can't really explain in great detail how you're in this obviously somewhat dangerous environment, but yet I'm completely relaxed, and all I'm thinking on is, how can I best render what I'm seeing to give not only just a literal interpretation of the scene, but also somewhat the feeling of being there. One of the nicest compliments I got on a review of my book was, Robert takes chances so you don't have to. And that's a nice thing to say, but that's important that they get the idea of what it's like to be there.
Are there more books to come? Are there more pictures to take, staying in the abandonment of these buildings?
I'd like to think so. That's the great part about the on-demand printing. I don't have to sell 10,000 copies for a publisher to pick up another issue of my book. So I will probably do something at some point. I have enough to fill probably 5 or 6 books just now. But again, I just have to keep shooting. I'm always finding interesting places, and of course the last shoot is always the most exciting for me.
Oh, absolutely. And as far as infrared work, what are you teaching others, do you think, in developing that particular niche that you're working in?
It's mostly through my blog work. I've gotten a couple of folks that have inquired as to how to go about it, how to do it. And that's actually a nice reward because I'm not doing anything that someone else can't do or someone else hasn't already figured out how to do. I may render it a little bit differently, but I'm very happy to share my knowledge, and I've had some good results with, for lack of a better word, my students that have written me and got their cameras converted and gone out and tried it on their own.
So from the 6th grade with that little Kodak camera to now, in that space of time, are you at your peak now, or is there more to come?
Well, there's always, that was actually my very first blog post. I was very hard pressed to get into social media, but
good for you, because that takes guts too.
That my very first post was, there's always more to come. So I guess what I started with is still where I'm at. There's always, more to come. There's more buildings to capture. I'm always looking for new sites. I try and see if I can find new places. Sometimes I stumble on them. Sometimes I see someone's image, and even if they're kind of hard pressed to not give the location, which a lot of urban explorers won't, there's always the metadata within JPEG files that you can get a GPS location on.
Well, you piqued my interest, and thanks for coming on. Love the book, and keep doing what you're doing. It's very interesting. Robert C. Marsala, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Ann.